encouraging to the community. So even what are some ideas that conflicts this? What are evidence that shows that? And older people have a difficulty keeping track of things they have to do in their minds. Finally, you organize what your essay is going to be like. That's a lot to cover. Let's see if we can do a couple more examples. Numerous factors can help determine whether an adolescent wearing a costume and mask will damage property if he doesn't get treats he asked for when trick-or-treating on Halloween. Define and discuss how each of the following concepts could affect the decision. Oh my gosh. Superego, level of moral development, conformity, de-individuation, and modeling. This is great. Do you see this? It combines Freudian, social, and cognitive development, and then learning and behavior. Oh my God, this is so much. And B, discuss how each of these factors in A helps determine whether or not an adolescent wearing a Halloween costume or mask will damage property if he doesn't get the treats that he wants. Wow. Yeah, awesome. So pause the video here, sketch an outline, and then we'll come back and discuss. I'm very impressed by this because it really tries to keep on many other things. So the first thing you want to do is understand that this person might do damaging antisocial activity and what's going to cause damage. So for each of these things, you want to talk about, probably you want to define it, give an example, and then finally do part B, which is discuss how each of the factors in A helps determine whether or not the adolescents wearing a Halloween mask would do it, and then relate to it. So it shouldn't be too hard, so I'll just give a couple that might be tricky here. You talk about the superego, which is basically the kid really wants candy, right? So Freud would say that whether they react by damaging is really issue of self-control, that your id wants the candy, but your superego says, no, 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 you have to follow societal rules. And the conflict of that might lead to this kind of damaging behavior, right? So we wanted to define this, define that. And then give an example of what the superego might look like if it's out of check, right? Maybe there's borderline personality disorder, antisocial conduct disorder, and then relate to this. So yeah, what's going to stop this kid from acting that way? It's really the ego, right? The next one is that of moral development. So you probably want to name drop Kohlberg right here. Kohlberg. And the 3 stages. And so this person would most likely be in the first stage if damaging someone would get him the candy, right? So we'll develop the different stage, define the different stages of moral development, give an example of the one in relation, which is probably the pre-conventional, because they're doing this because they're doing this because they probably want candy, and that's very basic pro and con development. And what's going to stop this kid? Well, they have a higher moral development, so if they understand the law, for example, or if they understand that there's higher principles, like people have the right to property, and they don't have we can't violate that and then damage their houses if they don't do it, something like that. Conformity, you'd probably want to name drop Ash, right, in the line study. Basically, if other kids are doing it, then he's going to do it too. The individuation is the idea with a mask. We could talk about the Stanford prison experiment, that when you have a mask, you feel de-individuated and that you're going to be more in the role. So there's a lot of studies. We talk about people wearing masks and they deliver more shock, for example. That's de-individuation. Modeling, of course, is watching other people. So one reason people they might model is if they get good behavior. If you see someone get punished for destruction, then the person's not going to follow that. So this is a really good question. It asks you a lot about these different ideas. Hopefully you got most of these, or even more. Let's go through another example. Don't have a lot of time. A neuroscientist thinks that he has developed a drug that can stop the progression of Alzheimer's disease in people who are in the initial stages of the disease. Design a research experiment that will support or refute his hypothesis. In your research, design and describe the following: sample, assignment, independent variable, dependent variable, experimental group, control group, possible confounding variables, and how would you determine whether or not the drug is effective? Again, this is another understanding experiment study. So pause and see if you can figure it out. This shouldn't be too hard, right? We understand, we want to say that, define what the sample is and how might it relate to this. Who's taking the drug? Alzheimer's patients, young, old. Is there random assignment? Do you just define why you need random assignment, right? You want to make sure it's important to include random assignment. What is the independent variable? They get the drug or not. The dependent variable, experimental group is probably the group that gets the drug. Control group is the one that gets the placebo. Confounding variables, I don't know, whether they're getting any other drugs, how they're treated, does it double blind, so on and so forth. And finally, you'll determine whether or not its drug is effective by using statistics to compare the two groups. Run a simple t-test to see how you measure their Alzheimer's outcomes, their memory, their movement, so on and so forth. This one isn't too hard. It's pretty straightforward, actually. Maybe the next one will be a bit harder. Although historically, nature versus nurture was considered an all or none proposition, most psychologists today agree that heredity and environment are both important in determining behavior and mental processes. Describe the extent to which heredity and the extent to which environment affect the expression of the following. Oh my God. Shyness, language acquisition. This is something we've never even studied, right? Phenylketonuria, that's a disease, violent behavior, and schizophrenia. Again, it's a question that uses this concept of nature versus nurture over a lot of different domains. You might not know what this is, and it's perfectly fine because it's pretty specific. They call this PKU disease, which is basically when someone doesn't have an enzyme they lack a certain kind of enzyme, and over time, if they eat a lot of food that has a strong kind of PKU in it, it builds up and it causes like developmental deformities like retardation. So the basic idea is that you want to talk about how shyness can be developed both using heredity and the environment. You might want to mention a lot of twin studies. You could, for example, in the language acquisition, we talked about the case where the kids in Colombia who were mute and developed their own language, or there's like a critical period, or that you could use, like in PKU, you could use the environment to control the expression of this disease. So you could purposely eat foods that don't have a lot of PKU in it. There's also schizophrenia, which is you have the gene that makes you lean towards getting it, but then if you're not in a stressful situation, it might not develop, so on and so forth. So this is another very good question. Hopefully you won't have any trouble answering something like this. Let's see, is there more? Yesterday, when a brown bear unexpectedly appeared in his backyard, John ran to his house faster than he ran before. Describe how John's eye and brain enabled him to see the bear. In your description, include how the eye focused the image, transduced the energy and transmitted information to the brain, identify the parts of the brain involved. Explain how the fight or flight response enabled John to run faster than ever before. And then using a current theory of emotion, account for why John experienced fear rather than anger or sadness. Again, another excellent question, because you have to figure out the eye, draw the eye, and then the way to the brain, which part, and there's a brain part, right? Which part of the brain is involved in this? Occipital lobes, of course. Then there's a fight or flight using the parasympathetic or the sympathetic arousal system, and then also an emotion, like either James Lange or Ken Bard, or the Schachter-Singer model. Most likely you'll answer this by the Schachter-Singer model, which is they feel the physiological arousal, and then they saw the bear, and they're able to explain it that way. I'll give you another example before you go. Oh, that's the last one, actually. Perfect timing. I thought another one. So that's the end of the class. Thank you so much for spending the last so many hours with me. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed it a lot. And so good luck with your studying. Call me if you have any questions. and I'll maybe see you in college next time you take a class in actual psychology. Thank you so much, good luck, and take care.